Hey everybody, this is Alec with Home and Rehab, and I want to give you guys just a little bit of a rundown, especially as we've been seeing more and more scientific updates come out, both regarding the current pandemic, but in general over the past couple of years with what we do, whether it's concussion rehab, orthopedic rehabilitation, a lot of things change, and very quickly. And I always like to talk to people about why, because it just sounds like otherwise we can't make up our minds. The short version of this is that research is constantly trying to refine things. So whenever we do any sort of scientific experiment, one of the things that we are supposed to try and do as much as possible is make sure that the experimental factors are the only things we're testing. However, with humans, that's almost entirely impossible. A lot of different variables come into play with almost every single type of thing we're trying to treat, whether it be disease process, weakness, injury, post-operative, surgical. Every single aspect of that has a whole lot of different parts of it, which means that absolutely controlling for all factors possible other than the experimental intervention is nigh impossible. And what that means is that our initial experiments usually do not have the exact same results as some of the ones later. Also, sometimes the things we're able to do early on, just because of availability, what tests are available, and how technology has evolved, means that we're not as able to delve into some of the processes as we'd like to be. A great example of this is the mask issue that's currently going on with the COVID pandemic. The initial studies that we did on whether or not masks were effective were essentially just trying to see if masks were able to filter a particle the size of a virus through. If the virus was able to get through that filter, it meant the filter probably wasn't very effective. All right, well, let's throw that out and try the next thing. However, what we were not considering in the initial tests was how viruses actually travel. And in the particular case of this virus, it primarily travels through the water droplets that are exposed whenever we breathe out or sneeze or cough. Those tiny little microscopic droplets have a much, much larger density than the virus that we're dealing with. So when we actually take a look at the surface area of those particles, those actually do get filtered. And because they're getting stopped, any virus they're carrying would then get stopped as well. It's the reason that if you're wearing a mask over your face, it feels so hot and humid under there. Because every time we breathe out, that moisture is getting trapped inside, which is exactly what we're trying to do with them. But we weren't thinking about that when we did our initial tests. We just measured particle size, which was a very sensible thing to do until we knew more about what was going on. However, as new experiments have come forward and we've actually learned more, and we've been able to take a look at which populations have been wearing masks and which ones haven't, we've been able to see the trend and come up with a better explanation for what's going on. And now that we have that understanding, oh, wow, it really does look like masks do a lot more than we expected they would at our base analysis. Well, that makes a lot of sense. We see the same thing in orthopedic surgery. Which surgeries are performed and how has changed drastically over the last 10 years. And the reason behind this is the original rationale for some surgeries was put in place almost 60 years ago in some cases. And as things have evolved, as our understanding of human anatomy, which continues to change almost yearly as we study more and more about the body, our understanding of human physiology, about neuroscience and how that affects how our body interacts with things, we learn more and more and more that, oh, there's way more to this that we need to make sure we're addressing appropriately. So the indications of when to do a surgery, how to do a surgery, what are the best techniques for that surgery, are going to change every time we can take a better look at both the technology and our understanding of how it applies. So it's very normal that as things evolve, we're able to evolve with them with our recommendations. But I can completely understand that it makes us look a little bit bouncing off the walls. So what I always like to let people know is what we try to do in medicine across the board is use what's called best current evidence. What that means is we take a look at the research that has come out from point A to point B in the timeline. If something was discovered 5 years ago, we're going to have less evidence, of course. The longer ago it was, the more studies we've been able to do on the matter. And what we do about that is then we take a look at the quality of that research, depending on which factors they controlled for. Did they use technology that was appropriate to measure what we were trying to measure? Did they have placebo controls if applicable? Were they actually looking at a control group when applicable to compare different things that were going on and look at, all right, did this study measure as well as we were hoping what we thought it was? Or was it just the best effort at the time and things have moved forward? And this happens very often. A lot of the studies that we look at in regards to physical therapy did not control for a lot of factors very well. And a lot of things have changed drastically because of that. These studies initially started usually about the late 80s or the early 90s. And in that time period, Technology has evolved drastically, which is great news. It's exactly what we want. But it also means we have to apply this new technology and our new knowledge to what's going on and go, oh, that doesn't do what I thought it did. I should probably change my approach. And that willingness to change is, of course, important throughout medicine. We have to be able to take a look at what the current best evidence states. If we have a new study that shows us better evidence now than it did a couple years ago, we need to take a look at what that evidence shows us about how we need to change our approach to things. One of the common things we used to do a lot in physical therapy was therapeutic ultrasound. The concept that we thought we were performing was we thought we were heating into further dense tissues of the body by applying sound waves. Now we were able to study at the time using infrared whether or not that thermal energy was getting there. Excellent, good. We saw thermal energy getting there, and we noticed that if we asked someone if they were in more pain or less pain after the intervention, they tended to say less pain. Well, that's great. We've applied deeper heat to a tissue we think is causing the problem. Person says they're in less pain. That seems like it works exactly like we thought it did. What we didn't do in those early trials, though, was control for placebo. So one of the things that came into play later was they started to make a machine that looked like it was an ultrasound, turned on like it was an ultrasound, but didn't actually produce any sound waves. And they found that the results from the patient end seemed to be exactly the same, even though the thermal application wasn't applied. Which means they didn't get any of the theoretical results of the sound wave, they just got results from us rubbing something over their skin, which is massage. Now, we do know that there's some really good results from manual therapy. We're still trying to understand the how and the why, but we do know that we can get that. So if it turns out ultrasound is really just applying a manual therapy with a fancy machine behind it, if we use this manual therapy now, we can go, okay, well, here's what I'm doing, and like with any manual therapy, we then teach you to do it at home. Here's how you can do it with yourself. Now you don't have to go out and buy a machine, and you don't have to become dependent on my clinic to have that machine for you. Because we've learned, as the evidence has grown in quality, that what we're studying needs to divert in direction. Perfectly normal, but we have to be able to look at that evidence and go, okay, that's different and I can do that. Another great example is our approach to tendinitis. Early tendinitis studies, we found that people had some really great gains in tendinitis when they did an eccentric lowering approach. All right, well, that was really cool. We had some theories as to why. Turns out they were wrong, and that's okay. But as more and more research has come about, we've learned that just because eccentrics have positive benefits doesn't mean it's the best place to start, nor is it necessarily something that everyone has to go through. Just that in general, the concept behind why they were effective needs to filter its way into the rest of what we're doing. And now the current best evidence shows that we should probably be doing what's known as a progressive loading approach, meaning that if you have a tendinitis, you should work the muscle at a load that is minimally painful but still provides the tissue adaptation that you would get from any other type of training, including eccentric. That's great, but you know what? In a couple years, that might change too. So my job as a physical therapist, and as the job of all of us on staff here, is to be consistently reading that research as it comes out monthly to determine, all right, is this research better quality than what I was reading before? If it's better quality, does that change what I've been doing? If so, perfect. How do I implement that in my practice? So you'll notice around here, things change pretty quickly. Exercises that you may have been doing last year, we may have replaced them with something that has come out to be even better. Well, that's great. That means we're staying up to date on this stuff. But it does mean that things change very quickly in the medical field, and that's okay. It just means that we are willing to acknowledge our mistakes in the past and try to go, okay, well, now that I have better evidence, can I do something even better for my patients? Hope that encourages you guys and that helps you understand a little bit of why things are changing all the time when you're reading new studies or new things in the news about, hey, well, that's completely different than what I understand. That's all right. It's different than what we understood too. And we're just trying to keep up and make sure that we are doing things the very best that science is helping us be able to figure out how. Have a great one, everybody. We'll see you soon.